Okay, we are live. This is Damian, Sleepy Reader, and I am here with a special guest, one of my favorite YouTube people, Mr. ComicKkrakk, Terence.
Hello, everybody. How's it going?
And it was Terence's suggestion, but I was kind of waving around Nixon's pals recently, and he suggested we talk about it. So we're going to have a little chat, at least starting with Nixon's pals, which is a graphic novel by Joe Casey and Chris Burnham.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if did it come out only as a graphic novel or as a singles first?
You know what? I don't know, actually. And I don't know if it says anywhere. It might have just been its own standalone story. It doesn't read like it came out in singles, that's for sure. But I could be wrong about that.
The art at the back is listed as pinups, not as variant covers or anything like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I think it might have just come out. The only thing that makes me wonder about it is the Chris Burnham art on the cover is clearly more recent Chris Burnham art. It's in a more sophisticated style with a lighter line value.
Yeah. It's definitely his kind of later Burnham work that I know. This is still him kind of finding his chops, I guess, or finding his voice or whatever.
Well, is it fair to say we're both Chris Burnham fans? We're fans of his art.
Absolutely.
And that's part of the attraction of getting this book for me.
Well, it's funny because we were just talking about it before, and I was saying how I didn't know very much Joe Casey stuff, and you brought up the book that I had sent to you a while, like last year or whatever, or 2 years ago, Officer Down, and it completely escaped my mind that he even wrote that because I was just purely reading that for the Chris Burnham art, and it's a lot of things that I just follow the artist, and I guess that makes it clear to me. Sometimes I think I like to fool myself that, no, I follow writers too. It's like, no. You follow artists mainly. You know, it's 90% artists that you're looking for.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are some artists who are just really have a cool style and you just want more of them, and you're not really, when you're buying, I mean, it's great if the story turns out to be great, but you're saying, hey, how could I find some more Chris Burnham after you get a little bit of Chris Burnham?
Totally. Well, and especially for stuff like this, they're paired really well. That was the big thing. I mean, it's definitely a relationship that works because his style is just so kind of visceral and violent, and it's just crazy. It's a wild style. And they work together because it's just a wild, crazy, violent story. You know, I mean, I don't know how many main characters have been beaten up so much in a book, like page 3 or whatever, he's getting his ass kicked basically. So it's interesting.
Well, and other than Officer Down, which you sent me a while back, my main knowledge of Chris Burnham had been in Batman Inc.
That's right, yeah.
In the New 52 that he did with Grant Morrison. And now I feel like that was great art, but it wasn't as typical of him because we're seeing in Nameless with Grant Morrison more the wild, gross out kind of art.
For sure, but
that we also saw.
If you take a look at that second series of Batman Incorporated, there's some really violent, messed up things in that. Particularly, there was an issue, I think, where he was up against that Professor Pig that took place in like this butcher. I mean, that entire issue was just blood soaked. Like, it was pretty grisly, but for sure it's definitely not to the degree of some of this other stuff, no doubt, but he does have those moments, and his kind of facial features that he draws I really like as well. And sometimes, like, one thing I'll just kind of one thing that I noticed in this that's a Chris Burnham thing, his framing is really, like, the way he frames a panel is really, there's a couple of things that he ends up doing that just scream to me, even beyond his style, that it's him. I probably won't be able to find it. There's one conversation he has with his kind of nemesis in the cop station. And here you go, right here. Particularly, let's see if it shows up. This panel right there where his face is really low to the bottom of the frame and there's text on top. To me, that's a real Chris Burnham kind of framing, having the character at this odd angle down in a panel or on an edge of a panel or something while there's dialogue. To me, anyway, that's kind of one of his signatures, I think. Yeah.
Right. Well, and well, their faces, I mean, in this book in particular, but I think everywhere, even like in the Batman books, the faces always look in pain and stressed out. He doesn't do a calm, relaxed superhero face.
It's true. And even when they are calm, they still look really like on the edge. That's very true. That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. They look a little psycho no matter what.
It's very true. Yeah. Yeah. He's got a wild style. So what did you think of the book other than the art? Like, what did you think of the story itself?
I liked this story a lot. And for those of you who saw me discussing Butcher Baker, which was by Joe Casey, this has all the crazy Joe Casey-ness stuff under control compared to Butcher Baker. And so I like it when he takes that craziness and makes it really work in a story about a real character going through a real experience. Mm-hmm. So this book is about a a probation officer for low-level superpowered thugs. And he's trying to be sympathetic and help them out. and in sort of traditional film noir kind of style, he gets beat up all the time and things always go wrong for him. And so I like that kind of plot format. I like that the twist on the superhero story and the twist on the film noir kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Would you characterize it similarly, or?
For sure. Yeah, no, it's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, he's the stereotypical kind of pulp detective in a way almost. And, you know, like that noir kind of character. He wants to do good, but just at every single turn, he's getting shit on by his wife, these criminals. I mean, although in this one, the one thing I did like was that one criminal who was the chef. Their relationship was very cool. Even at the beginning, it was done really well because you could see that this guy wanted to be good. He just was, you know, that usual story of like, I'm out of prison, now I'm a fry cook or whatever. It's like, oh, this is so much easier if I could just use my powers and do this bad shit. But their relationship I really liked. And then it culminates in the end too. Yeah. So.
Well, so to me, it's interesting because it's a story about you kind of keep losing until you win somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I liked the shape of it because it was not your typical story. He doesn't win in a real way. He doesn't save the day and make everything right at the end. Instead, he kind of breaks free from his chains and he's going to start a new life at the end of the book, which is not so common in comics. Sometimes it happens in literary novels or the like, perhaps.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the kind of thing that really draws me into these kind of stories, because you're right, it really becomes like it's this personal battle. You know, it just manifests itself in him actually getting his ass kicked and actually going through these heartaches with his wife and all this kind of stuff. But then by the end, he's kind of free, like you said. He's just found what he actually needs, and you know, yeah, it's a good point.
Right. It's almost a rebirth. It's his rebirth, and his full rebirth was going to happen after the book is over. I don't want a sequel showing me what he did,
Absolutely.
But I kind of like that open-ended.
Yeah, you don't need it at all, for sure. So just to kind of bring you back to that Butcher Baker then, because Wednesday Serial said something that I found really great. He was talking about how maybe that was more Joe Casey's id, you know what I mean? So is that what it felt? It just really felt unhinged and really not, it wasn't really streamlined. It was just all these ideas that he just threw down. Is that fair to say, or?
Yeah, and it was just over the topness for its own sake, without any kind of character arc and without any, I don't know, it was just almost like vomiting onto the page in a certain way.
Yeah.
Not that it was as bad as that makes it sound, but so and then Officer Down, if you remember it, is kind of just, in a way, Officer Down is kind of an imitation of Hard Boiled by Frank Miller and what's that artist's name?
Geoff Darrow.
Yeah. And in a certain way, Chris Burnham's a bit of a Geoff Darrow wannabe.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%.
And Officer Down, in my memory of it, is let's just see how outrageous and crazy we can get.
Totally, and
I
that's
think,
kind of
I think it was much better than Butcher Baker.
okay.
Probably
All right.
partially because it was shorter, and
Yeah.
partially because Chris Burnham is the perfect artist to do that with. If you don't have Geoff Darrow.
Yeah,
So
because that was
I
kind of
think
where my question was leading, because I see that one in that similar vein. Officer Down was definitely, it was just, let's just blow shit up and let's just go crazy and have this violent guy. And there's nothing about the story that stuck with me whatsoever. It's the visuals. It was purely here's a thread of a story, so you can just go nuts with your art, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. And if anyone likes beautiful, ugly, violent art, that's a great book to get.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But it really is just for the art and for the maybe the angry energy of it all. But I do think of Joe Casey as a writer who likes to imitate other writers. Like the other big thing I know him from is Godland, which is, a huge homage to Jack Kirby.
For sure, yeah.
And Butcher Baker felt I can't, Officer Down, I can point right at Hard Boiled, but Butcher Baker felt like one of those underground comics parodies of superhero comics.
I see. Yeah.
And instead of Nixon and Spiro Agnew, it had what was the right-hand man of Bush? The guy who really ran the show, the old bald.
Cheney.
It had Dick Cheney and it had Jay Leno.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Evil Republicans behind the scenes, which I don't know what they pulled Jay Leno just out of their hat, but
yeah.
But they played that role of the evil politicians, and then Officer Down played the role of the superhero who's really just a total fascist and loves to fuck women and beat people up, and that's all he exists for.
Well, that
so this guy had a soul, and no one in those other books did.
That's true. Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, no, he really did care. It was an enjoyable read. I enjoyed it, and I think that's maybe a thing too. If maybe I was more into Joe Casey, maybe for both of them, this would be a good thing as far as seeing a development of an artist. Whether it's a writer or the actual artist. Because I mean, Burnham's style, like we talked about before, I don't know if we were on or not, but you can see that it's his still finding himself. It's still his transition, which I really like seeing with an artist. I like seeing their whole arc and how they've come about their style and see them playing around and, Yeah,
it's funny. At moments, his style in this one reminded me a little bit of Charles Burns. Do I have the name right? The guy who does those really weird kind of... I can't remember the name.
Black Hole and...
Black Hole, the guy who does Black Hole, yeah. It seemed a little bit like he was playing with different styles, and maybe Charles Burns was one of his influences too, along with Geoff Darrow and Frank Quietly. And now he's much more a Frank Quietly, Geoff Darrow kind of artist.
Completely. Yeah, and I find that that's the style that really draws me, because Quietly is another favorite of mine too. It's right. They all are very similar, though. You're right. Yeah.
Right. I guess in this, there's more heavy blacks. I mean, I picked a page with a lot of heavy blacks. There's more heavy blacks. He fills the space more often than he does in his later work. I wish I did have Officer Down here to compare, but
yeah. I wouldn't know where to look for mine. So did you?
I guess the thing about go ahead.
Did you read Godland? Did you, like you said, you just read a few issues, or did you follow through the whole series?
No, I think I read about 3/4 of the issues.
Okay.
Back when they were coming out, back then I would go into comic book shops at random. I didn't even think about going in every Wednesday or anything like that. And whenever I would go, I would buy a bunch of Godlands. And so I think that I got up to a certain point, and then Godland became more sporadic, and I didn't stumble across it anymore. But now I plan, when I have when I have money, to get the 3 deluxe editions that they put out.
Okay. Are they like hardcover editions then?
Hardcover, oversized. They call them celestial editions, to go with the celestialness.
Nice. Yeah.
And I just realized as we're talking, the thing that... So I haven't read any of Joe Case, to my knowledge, his Marvel or DC work. So I've just read his indie work. And the thing that I see in all of these is that he consistently creates bizarre characters, particularly bizarre villains. Godland had that too, which at the time I just thought he was trying to channel the bizarreness of Jack Kirby. But there's great bizarre villains here, you know, starting with the woman with the crazy breasts. And Otto Oblivion, the mad inventor, and all kinds of other people.
But they're all
he
still
does
kind of grounded in that old Marvel, don't you think? Aren't they still kind of grounded in that world?
They are, but they go way over the top. And that was, the villains were the best thing in Butcher Baker. There were some crazy fun villains in that. You know, there was a guy named Angerhead, and there was a hermaphrodite cosmic super villain who you know, had no morals and couldn't understand the universe because she was she was so above everything. So everything he does is derivative. So that hermaphrodite was like Dr. Manhattan, who is like Dr. Solar or whatever. But, you know, so he just pushed it to another level. Like, if you really are this cosmic being, why would you be a man or a woman? You'd be both.
Interesting. That's kind of interesting.
I like the way his mind works that way, I guess.
So then what was his writing like in Godland? Because I had a bunch of issues and I maybe read one or two of them. And I don't have the issues even anymore because I just didn't follow it. I think I jumped in midway and just tried out a couple issues for the same reason. I liked the look of the art and it reminded me of that kind of Kirby-ish style.
In my memory, he went a little too far in like taking some of this childlike silliness of Jack Kirby's cosmic work and going too far with that. So I liked it. I mean, obviously I want to buy the Celestial edition.
For sure.
But it did. It wasn't fully satisfying. It was a little. Again, like some of these other ones we talked about, not as well grounded in character as this one is. So for his writing, I think this is my favorite of all, even though it's not Chris Burnham at his peak.
It definitely isn't. There's no doubt about that.
But so I'll definitely, now I tried, actually, Joe Casey wrote a comic book called Sex, which was about a retired Batman-like hero who was trying to have a sex life, I guess. And I made it for about 3 issues and it was very annoying. But now I might like get the trades out of the library or something and see if I change my mind.
Give it another visit. Yeah, that's right. You guys had mentioned that too. I didn't realize, again, he's just completely off my radar, but I didn't realize he wrote that as well.
Right.
And that was another
it feels like
one too, wasn't it?
Sorry?
Was that an Image one as well too?
That was another Image one.
Okay.
It feels like he doesn't have original ideas. So Sex was about Batman. And Godland was about Jack Kirby characters. I think he's currently doing one that's basically about characters like Jack Kirby's Asgardian characars come to Earth for a party. I think it's called Valhalla something.
All right.
I didn't pick it up, but now that I've read a bunch of him at once, I'm becoming more curious. I kind of hated Butcher Baker, even though there were some good things in it.
Yes, you did. Yeah, I remember seeing the. Well, and the other good.
But this makes me really pro about him again. Sorry, Terence?
Sure. No, that's fine. That's the other thing you guys brought up in that talk too, was the whole underground kind of aspect. And that really, from what you're saying about these other books, it sounds like he's really just, hey, let's take all these things that you liked in your childhood and really just make them dirty and perverted and nasty and fuck it all. And let's just, like it's that kind of anarchic feel of some of the underground comics. You just turn everything upside down and have Mickey Mouse having sex with Minnie Mouse and whatever else you want to do, and who cares if we get in trouble? Let's just do it, just for the sake of doing it.
And I think Joe Casey wants to bring that to comics.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why he's doing a comic book called, or to more mainstream comics. That's why he's doing a comic called Sex. And
yeah, totally.
I think that was his concept in Butcher Baker. I think, well, both Matt and I agreed Butcher Baker would have been good if it was 3 or 4 issues instead of 8.
Yeah.
Howler Mouse is watching us, and he is glad we're talking about Godland. He didn't think anyone else knew about it.
Yeah.
I guess it is kind of obscure. I mean, they did finally manage to finish it, but I think they probably had financial problems, and it took them a long while. He says he just needs 1 issue, and then he'll have them all.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
How many? Figure out what issues I have. Maybe it makes more sense just to find the last issues that I need. And
yeah.
But I love oversized things too. And
there's something about that format, right? Like that hardcover, oversized format where you can really soak it all in is pretty awesome. That's the other thing I was going to say about this. Like, that was a good chunk. I found by the time I had finished reading this, it was like, okay, that was perfect. I didn't feel like it went on too long. I didn't feel like it was too short. It was a really nice amount. If it would have went on longer, it would have lost me. I think it was the perfect kind of chunk, perfect slice of his life that we needed to see to get the point, you know?
Right. We got all we needed. We don't need a continuing series with Nixon.
Sure.
I wonder why he named him Nixon.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Given all the baggage that name comes with, I kept expecting some reason for him to be named Nixon, but I never saw that.
Well, and that's the thing. Maybe there's no baggage to it, you know, because I guess he's also appealing to a different generation where they wouldn't have any of the associations. I mean, I barely have any of the associations. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Canadian, I suppose. But
yeah, because you're you're roughly 10, or maybe even more than 10 years younger than me. So Nixon probably happened right around the time you were being born, or something. Yeah. So, and you're Canadian, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, who cares about some silly thing that happened here? But except that he has such a satirical making fun of American politics in some of his other books.
Yeah.
That's why I kind of wondered what was going on there. But I think maybe he just thought it was a fun name.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're right. It never does come up at any point. There's not even any subtle jokes or jabs about his name as far as I remember.
Yeah, you're really right about the length of this, and it makes me want more sort of European album type of things.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I pick up the European albums, they really aren't that good. But I'm sure there are really good ones out there, but I don't always find the good ones.
And that's because of content-wise, or is it because of just the length of story, or?
Well, they usually are part of a series, actually, but they're not usually continuing stories. They're more like they're not literally like a sitcom, but, you know, in a sitcom, nothing really matters for the next episode or whatever.
That's right, yeah.
They're just like Asterix or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah.
But I've tried picking up more modern ones. I should try and do a video about them some point. I can't even remember the names of them right now. I just kind of randomly picked some out. So obviously I'm not necessarily getting the best ones.
Oh, so like you're buying new stuff that's being released now?
Some of the European stuff is being translated by this company called Cine Books, CINE Books, like cinema.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've picked up a few of those, but none of them have made a big impression on me yet.
Okay. Do you remember any of the creators' names attached to them?
They weren't creators that I knew.
Okay.
And I don't remember their names. And they were sort of science fiction and barbarians kind of things.
Okay. Yeah.
They didn't leave much of an impression on me.
Yeah. Well, which is the first thing, right? That's the first point of, well, I don't remember, and I just read it last week, so therefore it was shit, you know? That's the biggest telltale sign, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I keep hoping to find, like you did, some Moebius.
Yeah.
And at some point, Marvel was publishing Moebius collections, and I used to have some of those. I don't know what I as with many things, I let them dribble away somewhere, but you'd think those would be findable.
Exactly, and that's part of the thing that blows my mind. Like, it's not like this is a guy who's had nothing reissued in North America. But I guess maybe that speaks to people who have bought it. They're not selling it. You know, they're holding on to that stuff. They're not showing, because I've looked for years. I was ecstatic when I found that one buried in a corner of this upstairs bookstore, and I frantically dug. I thought, well, if one is here, they've got to have a couple more. But no, that was the only thing that they had, you know. So I mean, I bought it anyway, but yeah. I mean, people must just be holding on to them.
Yeah, the only Moebius I now have is heavy metal magazines. Whenever I dig up one of those, I go, oh yeah, if it's from the Moebius period, I just grab it.
Yeah, for sure.
So then I have bits and pieces of, because they usually just have like 4 pages of Moebius per issue or something.
That's right. Yeah, the heavy metal magazine I bought just the other day has a short 2 or 3 page strip by him in there to Airtight Garage of, and I can't remember the character's name, but yeah, I haven't read it yet though. Yeah.
Is it Jerry Cornelius? No, it's something like that though.
Might be something like that. I can't. I haven't even read all of Airtight Garage. I've got some of it digitally, but I haven't even read all that yet. So he's got such a huge body of work too that it's a lot to take in, and even finding it digitally. Sorry, there's something on the screen there. Even finding it digitally has been tough, you know.
Well, and ironically, because of that lack of Moebius in the United States, and I guess in Canada too, is a lot of people think Frank Quietly invented that style.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And he has evolved from a Moebius imitation, but it's very clearly a big part of his style.
For sure. Yeah, it definitely evolved from it, but nowhere near the amount of detail to his backgrounds. And that's one thing, while we're on this Frank Quietly bit, one thing that didn't translate for the animated All-Star Superman, his backgrounds in the books are usually pretty flat, and there's really not a lot of detail, and they're not populated even by a lot of characters and things, which in the books I think works brilliantly. But in that moving image, in that animated moving image, completely fell flat. It just looked weird. It didn't seem right. But in the books, it's pretty incredible that even if it's just a block of color behind some characters, there's something about it though that really appeals to that lack of detail, you know. Right.
Well, I recently read Jupiter's Legacy.
Okay.
I got the trade, and that's Frank Quietly's most recent work. And I've been reading it's Mark Millar, and I've been reading a lot of Mark Millar books. And this one was so much better than all his other recent works.
Really?
And I realized it had to be Frank Quietly. And I think it's what he does with the figures.
Yeah.
And that's why he is so good at the acting, or whatever you want to call it, of the figures. And that's not going to translate into an animated cartoon.
No. It's about
what he
those
does,
moments, right?
Still pictures of those figures that makes the comic book deeper than it would have been if some other artist had done it.
Yeah. I read the first issue of that, and it didn't do anything for me. Like, his art worked for me. The story just really was that. It just seemed like another, oh yeah, here we go again kind of story. Like, how did it evolve? Has it evolved into something worth checking out?
It has evolved, but it's totally to be continued. And since Quietly takes 2 years to write a volume, or draw a volume, it's going to be a long time. But it definitely read, because I bought the first issue too, and then dropped it, and then I got the trade, and it read. I really loved it when I read it in the trade. Actually,
I'll have to check it out then.
And for a second, I thought, oh, I must really love Mark Millar after all. I don't hate him, but I don't usually think I love him. But then I picked up Chrononauts, and I was back to my usual feeling of meh about Mark Millar. So I think it had a lot to do with what Quietly added to the characters.
It was a little blip in the radar there. Yeah.
Right. And I don't know if you got to read the Multiversity by Grant Morrison, but there was one issue in that. I would try to get that one issue drawn by Frank Quietly and just skip the rest.
Yeah.
I think head and shoulders over everything else.
Funny you should say that, because I think I do actually have that issue just buried away somewhere upstairs, because I've got all these stashes of books around the house in the basement, main floor, in my room. I think it might be somewhere upstairs, and I just haven't. It's one of those I haven't got to, and it's the usual worry about getting into some of those things, like, oh my God, this seems like such a bigger part of a bigger story. I don't know if I want to even get into the territory, you know. So is it kind of a standalone thing then, or?
I think you can totally read it as just a standalone, weird retake on The Watchmen.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Drawn by Frank Quietly.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to.
Pretty amazing.
Good chance then. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, no, it's an interesting point though, what you said about the ability to capture those moments. And I think that's what the big thing is. And that kind of ties in again to this Nixon's pals, like the ability to catch these people in these moments of always in pain versus Quietly's moments of, I don't know what, like contemplativeness or whatever it is. Like there's these real moments that he can just capture so well, just with one still image, where if you get all that movement in between, it's like, oh, well, it's not as impactful because now I'm seeing these in betweens, you know. So
it's like if you tried to animate the Sistine Chapel or something, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, it would suddenly seem totally goofy. It looks so elegant, naked people reaching towards each other and stuff. Yeah. But if they all started moving around, it would be a totally different thing.
Yeah.
It is interesting because since Burnham and Quietly have similar styles, but they inhabit their characters in such a different way that they do feel very distinct. It's like they're two completely different people with similar styles.
For sure.
And I don't know if Burnham was copying Quietly. I think he was more copying Darrow.
For sure. I think so too, with the hyper-violent aspect of it. Yeah.
And Darrow is a whole good thing. Darrow has that style, which is also imitative of Moebius.
Oh, absolutely. See,
his personality is also different, and he has this weird sense of humor that informs everything.
It's definitely a strange sense of humor, yeah. And I mean, and that's the big thing for Darrow and even for Moebius, the amount of detail that they're able to do at moments. Mind-boggling how you sit there and you're going to draw every single shard of glass and every single rock and every single pebble and every single, it's amazing. And I don't know the speed at which he does these drawings, but I mean, he probably takes a while, although that Shaolin Cowboy, I don't know if he had the whole thing complete before they released it. I don't really know.
It came out very quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, it came out pretty quickly. So to think that if he was creating it as it was going, it's like, holy shit, this guy's a workhorse. It's impressive.
He almost seems like he must have some psychological problem when you read Shaolin Cowboy, you know, to draw those scenes over and over again with every tattoo on everybody's butt, and the little insects crawling everywhere and every speck of sand. You know, and to draw that 100 times, 100 panels of very similar scenes in such detail. I think I'm going to buy the trade on that. There's a really nice hardback that's oversized also.
Oh, okay,
so it's like I really want these things in the floppies, and then when they come out in a really nice hardback, then I want them that way, and I say, oh, I wish I hadn't spent the money on that.
Like so the oversized, is it kind of like an absolute type of size?
No, it's just a little bit bigger.
Okay.
I like this. This is a bit bigger than a comic book, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's how Shaolin Cowboy is too. But
okay.
Dark Horse does really nice hardbacks. So it's, you know, really nice binding on really nice paper and everything.
Yeah.
Although one thing is comics like that is like hiding them from my daughter.
Yeah.
Because I don't really want her to, even though it's just zombies or whatever, I don't want her to see her. Don't want her seeing people getting chopped up with chainsaws.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And that's something that I'm still coming to terms with. I mean, you know, movies and some of my art and things and just books and comics. And there's only so high I have on the shelves, you know, which continues to grow. There's going to be a time it's like, well, I got to hide them in the attic or something and put a lock on the door. I don't know. Like, got to do something about it. I just don't know what that solution is. But it's that world of being an adult when you're a child, all these mysteries, everything happens after midnight, and what kind of books are they reading and what's going on? It's nothing really. We're just trying to be kids again is all we're doing. It's just comics with like violence and naked women, you know, it's nothing really.
Well, my daughter, and maybe she'll always be this way because my wife is, gets very upset at the sight of blood. So people being chainsawed apart, and like in Officer Down, if you remember that, they just tear his body apart several times.
Yeah, yeah.
Gore Vidal says, good evening, and Moebius is expensive and hard to get. The Incal series is available, written by Jodorowsky. The editions I've seen of the Incal have been like $90 for like a oversized but not very long hardback. But maybe there's cheaper editions too.
That's the
Jodorowsky's Meta Barons is also excellent. I'm sorry?
The Humanoids editions, I think, which was Jodorowsky's publishing company. Those editions are a little bigger, and those ones I've seen for really expensive. But the edition that I got, I've never seen that version. I can't remember, was it the Epic version? I can't remember which version it was, but I'm tempted to just grab it. You keep reading, I'll grab it quickly. Hold on.
I think both, at different points, both Marvel through Epic and then Dark Horse have both reprinted some of, or a lot of Moebius, but for some reason, like you said, no one wants to sell their used edition. So he says Jodorowsky's Meta Barons is also excellent. So Jodorowsky continued the Meta Barons, or did he start it with Moebius and then continued it with other artists? I've always meant to try to grab a hold of that. And he says Moebius did do Moorcock's Jerry Cornelius series too. But so it wasn't Jerry Cornelius in the Airtight Garage, was it? But somehow maybe it was Jerry Cornelius.
Yeah, it might have been. I don't know where I put that Heavy Metal magazine, so I can't tell you. So the one that I do have is it is the Epic Comics version of the Inco. Yeah.
Right. So that's probably just the start of it, or it was
it's
long.
Part 2, it says on the front. And it looks like 1988 is this version of it. So I don't know when I'm assuming the Humanoids one came out afterwards, because I think that collected the whole thing in 1 or 2 volumes. But like you were saying, I mean, every time I do see something online, because I rarely see it in person, it's always just ridiculously expensive, which, you know, whatever, I guess people want it, so they charge whatever they want, but.
Right. I think Geoff Darrow actually moved to France and worked with Moebius. Yeah. And I think he did some stuff that had until just now only appeared in French. And I think Dark Horse is about to reprint it. I don't know if it'll come out in floppies or just in trades.
Well, there was that.
I'm kind of excited about that.
There was that series that I was getting for a while, the Dark Horse Presents, the older ones. And I think all that was European comics that Dark Horse got the rights to, and then did these volumes. And there was a lot of Darrow in there too, doing covers and inserts, and I think had some stories. But a lot of those artists it was all European, and I think mostly French artists and creators that were in those the small volumes that I have. I don't have all of them, but they're really worth picking up. You can find those pretty cheap too. So
I'll keep an eye open for that. There is Geoff Darrow work in the current Dark Horse Presents series.
Oh, is there?
Lots of spot illustrations, and I think maybe in issue 1, he writes and draws his own Rusty and the Big Boy.
Oh yeah,
remember that one about the robots?
Yeah.
But he does it in a very different way than when Frank Miller wrote it. For him, it's all just a visual joke. So it just shows all these really weird or gross-bodied people at a beach watching as Rusty and Big Boy fight a monster in the distance. And it's all just a lot like the Shaolin Cowboy. It's just some kind of weird sense of humor, visual gag.
Yeah. Just him.
I don't think I could even put a finger on what his sense of humor is.
No, and I mean the 1 or 2 interviews that I've seen with him, I can't even put a finger on it. He's a unique character. There's no doubt about that. I think on that Ink Studs program, there's an interview with him where he was talking about his time with Moebius too. I should revisit that interview and see. Yeah, I could see them getting along really well.
I wonder if they literally drew some things together, or one wrote and one drew, or something. That'd be interesting.
That would be, yeah. Has there been any other?
I always imagine that over in Europe, there's all this amazing stuff I'm missing. But like I said, I bought the wrong things because they
that's right.
Remember.
Well, and that's what I constantly say to myself here. It's like, there's all this great stuff happening everywhere else. I'm just living in the wrong province, you know, I'm just living in the wrong part of the world.
Well, with global warming, I kind of want to move to Canada. I think it might be the only cool place after a while.
Not with tornadoes touching down in the prairies. I don't know about that.
Actually, Brian K. Vaughan is about to have a comic book that has a war between America and Canada, or the U.S., I should say, and Canada.
It's true. I just saw it in this comic shop news.
I might find it too depressing. I don't want to go to war with Canada, but I suppose it could happen.
I really want to read it. It's called We Stand on Guard. And it says, doesn't say when it comes out. But yeah, I really want to read it. I noticed a little write-up on it in the last saga. And then they had like a 2-page kind of look at it, sneak peek at it, and he had mentioned it. Right. I'd really like to check it out, I think.
Yeah, the preview didn't really tell you very much about it.
No, it really didn't. No.
Yeah, it just was like of a woman fighting a robot. And it's like, well, that could be any comic book.
Yeah. And then these people kind of see her at the end. Yeah, totally. I think it was just nice to get a sense of what it'll look like, I guess. But yeah, it might be interesting. Yeah. Who knows with that guy?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of picture a scenario with global warming where Mexico tries to invade the United States and then the United States tries to invade Canada. But
yeah, everybody tries to get further north, only to discover there's no snow left anywhere.
Well, and I've also thought that I should invest in desalination companies that we're going to need. That's where we're going to have to get our water from the ocean.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, I don't know why I thought of that. Before we went on air, we were both talking about the weird weather we were having.
Yeah, and that's happening everywhere. Yeah, and I tried not to get too depressing with the talk of all the people dying in the world from the heat, and
right.
It's what happens when you're an old man, Damian. You just, you know, just happens.
Well, we've got to ensure the survival of our children. Right?
True. So what else have you been reading lately? What else has been turning you on lately? Have you made any
The very first thing that pops into my head is, but I mentioned a lot in my videos, is Lumberjanes.
Okay, yeah.
You know, maybe the Europeans need to read some Lumberjanes. I'm trying to think of what else. You know, I keep grabbing a ton of stuff out of the library, like all this old Simon and Kirby comics, you know, from the 40s and 50s. I imagine they're out of copyright, and that's why so many people are printing them up now. But
yeah, that's right. Eh? Yeah, yeah. Because there's all these.
I'm not sure that I like those. They're just kind of interesting.
Well, again, I think it probably falls under that same category of seeing people at an earlier stage in their career, and you know, knowing what they eventually turn to,
what they eventually accomplish.
Yeah.
I actually digitally, I haven't read them yet, but I bought 2 issues of Prez. You know, they're redoing Prez now as a young teenager who gets elected as president through Twitter.
Okay.
So I went back and there's 4 issues of the comic book Prez from the 70s. Which have you heard of Prez?
No, I don't think I have. It doesn't sound.
You probably were a toddler at the time. So you know, back in it was really a response to the 60s, even though it came out in the 70s. You know, the whole idea that the youth culture was taking over everything, right? So they made a comic book where a teenager becomes president of the United States. And it was written by Joe Simon. So Joe Simon, you know, of the Kirby and Simon fame, came back in the 70s and wrote these odd comic books like Prez and what was that other one called? Something Super Freak, and he did some other weird things. So I haven't really read the Prez yet, but I'm kind of curious to look back on it. I'm kind of looking at all these oddities from the 70s and 80s, you know, that only had a few issues. I just can't think of what some of the other ones were.
Some of those are great, though. That's part of the fun of digging back and finding those like odd one out, you know, that just had 4 issues before it either got canceled or it wrapped up or whatever. I love
Right.
the one bookstore in town, that this Red River Bookshop, and they've got a huge catalog
That you
of
talked about in
comics.
the video.
Yeah, and I just love digging through there because there's always something. He has a lot of the same stock, and he's had a lot of the same stock for years. But every once in a while, you still find a couple of issues of like, what the hell is this? And you can still find some gold, and all it is just these older comics that, you know, you get some hits and they just didn't go anywhere. They didn't get noticed, or whatever the reason, right? So those are the kind of fun ones. That's like crate digging if you're a record collector, you know.
Yeah.
Finding that.
And some of them become cult items. The one that always springs to mind is Omega the Unknown. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've read those ones. Yeah.
Steve Gerber take on Superman, I guess. Superman in the Ghetto. Which then Jonathan Lethem rewrote. I have never read his rewrite of it. Yeah, and I guess Steve Gerber was still alive when he did it. Gerber was furious that anyone would redo his work. But.
That's right, yeah. And then it was that Farrell Dalrymple that did the art on the re-envisioning of it, or the retake on it. Right. He was a great artist, and that was the reason why I dived into that, because I really liked his art, and the look of those newer issues were pretty impressive. Neither series really left a huge impression on me. I enjoyed them. I enjoyed them both. But I think since I don't have them in the collection, I think they made their way to trade for other stuff, you know. So, but they were great to read, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, I read Omega the Unknown when it was coming out, or some of the issues, and it really kind of stood out as an oddball thing at the time, and I think that was part of the appeal of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Christina is also watching us, and she says the InStock has a printing of the Incal hardcover for $33.
Oh, wow.
So I need to look for that.
I wonder if that's
Gore Vidal says that it was Jerry Cornelius in the Airtight Garage.
Okay.
And that reminds me, you know, Jerry Cornelius is a Michael Moorcock creation, but he actually created him as back in the 60s, he was doing this radical science fiction magazine called New Worlds in England. And he created Jerry Cornelius as a character that anyone could use. So I guess Moebius picked up on that and just went with it. So I don't think you have to pay Michael Moorcock to use Jerry Cornelius. That's still true, but it was back in the 60s.
Interesting.
That's kind of intriguing. Maybe I could write a Jerry Cornelius book.
Yeah.
And he says that there's a Humanoids copy with an introduction by Bendis. Wow, that's surprising. I don't associate Moebius with Brian Michael Bendis at all.
No, not even close. Yeah.
And he says the Meta Baron appeared in the Incal, and Jodorowsky later wrote the Meta Barons, which reads like a Greek tragedy. I'm having trouble with my window here. Reads like a Greek tragedy. I prefer it to the Incal series. So Gore Vidal really recommends Meta Barons, I guess. So I should look for that. Are you familiar with Gore Vidal? He's pretty new to the scene here on YouTube.
No, I don't know the name at all. No.
Yeah. He is a famous author, but
yeah, no, yes.
But this is not the same Gore Vidal.
Okay, all right.
But anyone who does not subscribe to Gore Vidal should click on him in the comments here and subscribe to him, because he's definitely a unique voice in the community who has a lot of interesting and non-mainstream points of view, or non-mainstream reading.
You've sold me already.
He and I have discussed, oh darn, now I suddenly forgot the name of the author. This is Stage Fright, because it's an author I know very well, a novelist. Anyway, Gore Vidal is really good. Check him out.
Yeah. And I'm not familiar, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, I'm not too familiar with it. Like, I like Jodorowsky's films quite a bit, but his comic work and stuff, I know that he's done quite a bit. I just haven't read much of it. It's something I wonder how his style translates, you know, overall in what he does. Because, I mean, his films they're mind-blowing, really amazing stuff. But I don't know how that translates.
Hard to imagine a comic book like his films, at least the ones I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't imagine Holy Mountain as a graphic novel. I just don't know how that would translate at all.
But is he the? Do you still have the Incal in front of you? Is he one of the co-writers on?
That's correct. Yeah, he's right there. He's listed right there. So, and I think it's as far as I know, I thought he was the writer all the way along. Yeah, I mean, it's copywritten by both of them, so it might be that kind of relationship where, writing and art went hand in hand and story changed. So he's credited as there you go. So they're both credited. They're co-creators. So it was a collaborative effort right there on the first page. Right. Yeah, and then I think I heard you read a comment earlier that the Incal got redone as well by another writer. And I can't remember the name. I'd found a couple of issues of that and read those. This was in one of the finds in the bins at Red River Bookshop, and immediately got rid of them because they just didn't read like anything that I would be interested in, and just, I don't know, just really lacked. And it was, I think, more a disappointment too, because I thought I had scored some issues of like, oh, I found some actual issues, and then to open it up and go, oh, this is not anything. What the hell is this? So, but I can't remember the creators' names at all on that one. So
I'm surprised someone had the rights to redo the Incal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or do like a sequel or whatever they're trying to do with it.
Well,
yeah,
I'm kind of out of thoughts. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, or?
I don't think so. No, I mean, it's just nice to talk comics, period. That's why I approached you in Wednesday's Serial, and hey, it's been too long. Talk to me about comic books.
I did when Matt and I were reading and talking about Butcher Baker. I did think about you because you are my go-to person for outrageous comic books.
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing that. Little invitation to the Hangout, and then when you started talking about it, I think I sent you a message right away saying that book sounds like it's right up my back alley. So it was a perfect time thing. Yeah.
Well, I apologize for that. I was just kind of randomly doing stuff that night without knowing what I was doing on Google, because I would anyone I wanted to do a real hangout with, I would try to contact you first.
Yeah. So you were just drunk dialing then, is what you were doing?
In essence, or just confused by Google for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad that perhaps has led to us having this chat. And
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
We can do more.
Yeah, no, I'd love it.
I might have. You were showing another Will Eisner book, Life Force, I think it was.
That's right. Yeah.
I might have that. I need to look. I definitely don't have the first one you mentioned.
Invisible People. Yeah. I just started reading. Yeah, Invisible People. I just started reading that today. Actually, I just started diving into that. I'm also reading that Electra Assassin too, because me and Matt are going to talk about that on Sunday. I think is what we've planned. But I started reading Invisible People. Yeah, we're hoping to. Yeah, we'll see how it. I'm sure it'll work out just fine, but it's just getting the times. He's only an hour difference for me too, which helps.
Right.
But the Invisible People reads really well so far. I mean, it's just 4 short stories. So I'm finished the first short story and halfway into the second one, and it's great. I mean, it's so great to see that other side of him, where it's just these real life characters and what he's seeing in his part of the city that he lived in, and the time period, and just his style is so incredible. The one thing that always blows me away about Eisner is like his lack of panels. There's so much in there where there's no borders around, where it's kind of framed by the rain or by a building or something. And I love that look of it, where it's this nice white space and everything. It's really, really great.
I hate that lack of panels.
Really hate? Oh, wow.
Which why is that? He did not have a lack of panels when he did his early work on the Spirit.
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe it's the adjustment between them that I have trouble with. I have a lot of the magazines where they would serialize his graphic novels. I don't own very many of his graphic novels, but I'd read some Spirit, and then I'd move over and read, part of, I forget what the names of them were, but part of some ongoing thing.
Oh, really?
And the lack of panels was just a huge kind of visual shock after going from a kind of a master of panel layout earlier in his career.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. I mean, his layout is still super impressive without the confines of, like, there's some flow to some of the pages that's mind-boggling. So just so I understand,
maybe I go back to all of that.
There was collections that had both those in one magazine, so it would be some Spirit plus some other stuff in one magazine?
Yeah, so they used to have, when Kitchen's, first they had the Warren reprints of the Spirit, but when Kitchen Sink took it over, every issue would have like an essay in it, a couple of Spirit stories, and then the latest thing that Will Eisner had drawn, which was kind of exciting. You were getting living Will Eisner stuff at the time. And then later it would come out, you know, in a hardback. And it wasn't like a comic book. I mean, it clearly was like an excerpt from a novel. It wasn't an episodic story. So I think he was really in love with Slice of Life in his later work.
Totally was,
and also recapturing certain eras in New York City and stuff that people might have been forgetting. Immigrant experiences and things.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, that's one conversation I'd love to have with you. You know, if you ever do find that life force, if you do have it, I'd read that in a heartbeat. I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. Because, I mean, your knowledge of Eisner is way bigger than mine is. But I think, I don't know, I like that comparison, especially now knowing that you don't particularly like the lack of borders. I think that'll make for an interesting conversation, a good conversation.
And maybe I'd change my mind if I didn't read some Spirit first, you know, because it was all in the magazine, you know.
Yeah, because I that's the main thing that works for me so well is seeing that on a page and just, you know, the guy was unique. It's really nice to revisit him every once in a while. He's one of those guys that I may go away for a while, but then I'll find a Spirit or something, or I'll see one of these books, and, you know, maybe it's once every couple of years or whatever the time frame is, but I'll always go back. And it's just such a refreshing place to go to. You know, it's so nice. There's something just really, I don't know, comforting about his storytelling and just the way he lays everything out. It's really nice to see again. Especially after, like I said, reading this Electra Assassin with Bill Sienkiewicz there, just his wild and crazy art, and then taking a break from that and going to this clean look of Eisner, you know.
Well, Eisner is pretty unique in many ways, but in the sense that he had this very successful career as a comic book artist. Then he left comics and did other stuff and had a very successful business there. And when he came back to comics and, quote, invented the graphic novel, which is very debatable. But in any case, when he came back, he was this experienced master, but he was just doing indie work in a sense. You know, he was doing what some people would just do in the beginning of their career before they can make a lot of money working for Marvel or DC.
With a serialized character.
You had someone at the end of his career with all the knowledge he had from a lifetime experience of being a successful artist, applying that to non-commercial work in essence. Just following his muse.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know if there's any other example of that. Because the normal arc, you know, to bring up Brian Michael Bendis is to do some indie work and some interesting stuff and then kind of cash in. Or because even if you don't totally cash in, become kind of a shadow of your former self, like, say, Robert Crumb or someone like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Where you just rehash the same thing over and over again. Yeah.
I mean, Robert Crumb is trying to do different things, but I don't think it doesn't have that certain something that it used to have.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sure. He's more of his time. He's that voice of that initial underground, you know. Everything else is like, his art is fine and fantastic, and his portraits, and, you know, when he tries to draw more realistic, it's all great, but there's, like you're saying, guys like that, they're known for one certain thing, and it's it's you had a guy sticking his dick in a socket and it was called Zap
Right.
Comics. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that
Yeah.
is, I'm sorry, but you're not going to grow past that. That's what it is. Yeah.
Right. Or he's overshadowed by the myth of his youth at the very least. I'm trying to think of someone who might have come. I mean, unfortunately, Jack Kirby, when he came back after, he went to Hollywood and then he came back and he did things like Captain Victory, which I like, but it is sort of just trying to recapture what he did before. It's not really trying something totally new, and leaping right outside of the commercial boundaries that you originally established yourself in.
Yeah.
And now I've talked myself into going and searching out all of that later at their work.
Well, I'm glad I could help you talk yourself into it, because that excites me. I'd be happy if you could find some. Yeah, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I liked a lot of what I read in the backs of those issues, but I just always felt annoyed by the lack of panels, I remember.
For sure. Well, and like you said, and rightfully so, because it is a bit of an unfair comparison back to back, because the Spirit is really its own thing. And there's some incredible work in there. There's no doubt about it. It's just, I think maybe that's also what appeals to me about it, what you're saying, is the fact that, he had all this stuff going, and what does he decide to do? No more Spirit. Let's do these graphic novels and let's try this. And I think that's
right.
Worth some applause. And I guess that's partially why they have, the Eisner Awards the way that it is, I suppose, or maybe that was the original idea about it, to applaud these people who are following their own path, regardless. But
I think the Eisner Award would be there if all he'd ever done was the Spirit.
Yeah.
I don't. If you read enough, once you get into the Spirit, it almost is hard to read any other comic book for a while afterwards. It's really it feels so much richer and more innovative than anything else in general that other people are doing. At least for me, it's kind of like if you're reading Moebius, if you read a lot of Moebius, then you don't really want to read someone else right afterwards either, because they just seem weak cost comparatively.
Yeah.
They ought to have a Moebius award.
Yeah.
Maybe they do.
Sure,
In France. I don't know.
Yeah, they might. Yeah, who knows? Yeah. Cool.
Okay, well, on that note, they ought to have a Moebius award. Let's end this hangout. The first of many. So thanks everyone who's joined us this evening. We had 3 viewers, so I guess that was Gore Vidal, Christina, I can't pronounce her last name, Ayarte, and Howlermouse. So 3 awesome people. Can't really ask for a better audience than that.
Absolutely not.
And more people will watch this tomorrow, hopefully.
It's
so
true.
Thanks everyone for watching.
And at the end of the day, I roped somebody into having a conversation about comics with me, which is, my job was successful.
Right. You've talked someone into reading Will Eisner comics they weren't going to read.
Yes. That's awesome.